Hey everybody, this is Dianne, one half of the Real Housewives of Alaska.
Hey, and this is Marnell, and I'm totally distracted because I think my dog just got yelled at.
Oh, which dog and for what?
I have no idea.
Oh.
We did leave the house the other day for about 6 hours. We both went into the office for work, and Dexter did gnaw on a piece of furniture.
Oh, I was going to ask you what Dexter destroyed.
Yeah, no, he didn't destroy it. And I didn't even notice it for 2 days. And of course you can, you have 2 dogs. You can never be like, I know it was you, but I know it was him. There's just 3 scratchy teeth marks in our coffee table, which is super old, and we're replacing all of our furniture for our Christmas present to ourselves.
I'm telling you,
anyway, so
if you're gonna replace your furniture, you want to put him in that super skookum kennel because you'll be sorry.
if I ever go back to work,
right? You mean if you ever go back to the office full time? You're working more than full time.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we are actually here to talk about the documentary 3 Identical Strangers.
Because I said I couldn't handle doing Citizen4 and Snowden, and I'm not sure that I'll ever be able to. I'm not sure that I'm ready to tackle that.
Yeah, I don't know what we'll do next. So.
I actually have a pretty good idea.
Okay.
So I have a suggestion. I figured we could talk about it in Housewives Housekeeping.
And what's funny is, I don't not recommend Citizen4 and Snowden. It's just, it's in depth and,
I just don't think I've wrapped my...
kind of dry content.
It's not even dry. I don't even care that it's dry or not dry. I don't really think I've wrapped my whole brain around what I think about Snowden and what I think about WikiLeaks. And
Yeah, so did you see that they said that Julian Assange can be extradited?
Oh, I thought they denied his extradition.
Oh, okay, now I'm going to have to look it up.
I'm pretty sure Britain denied his extradition. I could be wrong. I've been kind of distracted by the shit show that is the United States.
You're correct. Julian Assange cannot be extradited to U.S. British judge rules. So, you were correct.
Can you blame them? Would you want to send anyone over here for truth and justice right now?
No.
All right. Anyway, so we are here to talk not about Julian Assange, not about Edward Snowden, but in fact about 3 Identical Strangers, because I said I need another Hail Satan.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that this was another Hail Satan, but it was really good.
Yes, I absolutely loved the movie. I saw it when it came out in our little art house theater here in Juneau. So I actually got to go into a theater and watch it the first time a couple of years ago. I rewatched it about a week ago because I was surfing Hulu and I was like, oh my God. So I rewatched it and then I recommended it for the podcast. So I watched it twice.
Oh, gosh.
The podcast. So I've seen it 4 times.
Oh my goodness. So I remember sort of catching... I don't even think I watched the whole thing because I definitely did not remember the end. I remember catching part of it on CNN about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. It wasn't at the time it was released. It was after its original release. And I thought, oh, this is really fascinating, but I didn't follow up on it. So I'm glad that you suggested it because it was very much worth watching. And boy, tons of stuff to talk about this documentary.
Yeah, I mean, we had seen the advertisement for it on another film at our little art house theater that we go to, who actually does the drive-in movies now here in Juneau. Since they can't have people sitting in a theater, they parlayed it into, we'll just put up a giant screen and project it, and they actually do it for free, but they'll take donations, of course. So they've been able to do an amazing about face during the pandemic and just totally revamp their their business. So that's been cool. But I saw it on an advertisement for another movie, and I was like, oh, that looks really good. We should go see that. And it started playing, and we went and saw it. And like, we were literally sitting in the theater just like going, oh my God, this can't get any crazier. And then it just gets crazier.
Right.
So what was your rating?
So my rating was 4.9 unpublished studies out of 5.
Oh, that's funny.
If Hail Satan is a 5, which it is.
I rated it very similarly. I rated it a 4.75, not unpublished, but I can't even think of the word, but 4.75 stars. But it, just like really uncool studies.
We'll talk a lot about that.
God, yeah. Unethical. That's the word.
Ah, okay.
Unethical
yes.
studies.
Completely
I didn't write
unethical.
it down because we just sort of started to migrate away from stars and
yeah, we've totally migrated away from stars. This is more fun.
Yeah, it is.
So I do have some numbers. It actually earned $12 million in U.S. release and $13.5 million worldwide, which I thought was very impressive for a documentary.
Mm-hmm.
It has a 97% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and an average viewer rating of 8.25 out of 10. So it's pretty well reviewed on Rotten Tomatoes. Not that that's the end all be all. The Housewives are, but but I thought the numbers were interesting. It premiered in 2018 at the Sundance Film Festival, and it actually won a documentary at this, or won an award at the Sundance Film Festival, U.S. Documentary Special Jury Award for Storytelling.
That's quite a
mouthful.
Long title. Yeah.
And it's actually a British production, so it was also nominated for a BAFTA award.
Ah, I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either, but the director is actually a multiple BAFTA-nominated director.
Ah, very cool.
Speaking of which, so our writer, actually, so this woman was writer/developer. Her name is Grace Hughes Hallett. This is actually her only writer-developer credit. She's got some director credits and a bunch of producer credits. And one of her documentaries sounded really interesting, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I didn't look on YouTube. I'll have to look on YouTube. It's called Diabulimia, the World's Most Dangerous Eating Disorder. I'm assuming that she's playing on, diabolic.
Huh.
But it sounded very interesting.
Yeah.
And then Tim Wardle is the director, Wardle. And he has 4 director credits and 9 producer credits. And again, is a BAFTA-nominated documentary director.
Well, very cool.
Yeah.
The thing that kind of caught my eye with Grace is the documentary The Dark Matter of Love.
And I'll be honest and say I didn't dig any deeper into her documentaries, so I don't know what that one's about.
Well, so it kind of relates to this one. It's a documentary on the psychological aspects of growing up without parental love.
Interesting.
It centers around the Diaz family, who chose to adopt 3 orphans from Russia, and how their new and old kids handle the family together.
Oh, very interesting.
Yes. So very, very relatable content to this movie.
So did you have a hero?
I did. I don't know really anything about her other than what was portrayed in the film. But Hetty Page, who was David's aunt.
I was going to say she was one of the aunties. Okay, I remember her. And was she the one who talked about how atrocious it was to discover that these kids were parts of of an experiment because their family had fled the Holocaust?
Yes, she
Okay.
was.
Okay.
And she was also the one at the beginning that talked about when all three boys first met, they wound up wrestling on the floor of
Like
her house
puppies.
like puppies.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just so adorable and loving. And like David's whole family just seemed very, very amazing. And we will totally get into that.
Well, my stuff about my hero is a little longer than yours.
Which is one of the reasons why I chose a shorter one. And yours is the really important one for the movie and the podcast.
So I chose Lawrence Wright, who is an investigative journalist, and he is actually the reason that the three boys learned that they were part of this study.
Right.
And
he
I
wrote the New Yorker article.
Right. And I actually knew about Lawrence Wright because I read his book Going Clear several years ago, which was turned into a documentary for HBO. It's about Scientology.
Yes, it's a very good documentary.
The book is fabulous too. The book and the documentary are both great.
And if I weren't scared of upsetting the Church of Scientology, Hail Xenu, we might do a podcast about it.
Oh, we might have to talk about it at some point.
Maybe.
So I had actually read that book several years ago. I had downloaded his book, The Looming Tower, which is about Al-Qaeda. Have not read it yet. Then discovered while I was researching him that he wrote a book that was released in April of 2020, a fictional thriller about a flu pandemic.
Huh.
He wrote it before, and it was like, edited and ready to rock before COVID hit. I mean, how freaky is that?
Yeah, it's kind of like the reboot of The Stand.
Right.
They started, they did the concept for it and
they
filming
like wrapped it
COVID.
before COVID. They like wrapped it 3 days before the March shutdown or 4 days before the March shutdown. It's crazy.
Yep.
Yeah, so anyway, his book about the flu pandemic was called The End of October. And then I discovered, as I was reading about him because of this movie, that he actually wrote a book called Remembering Satan, a tragic case of recovered memory. So, of course, I ended up putting the book about the pandemic and the book about recovered memory on my Kindle.
This guy just has his finger on the pulse of, what's happening or what's about to happen.
Lawrence Wright is really
world.
Brilliant. He's really smart. And he actually is interviewed pretty extensively in Going Clear. And then I don't know that I had seen any of his clips for this, or if I had, I didn't remember that he was part of it. Because again, I caught bits and pieces of it, but didn't watch the whole documentary. And I love him. He's so brilliant. And I actually went back and read the article that this movie kind of came from. So it was an article that he wrote for The New Yorker in 1995. It was actually published in August of 1995, and it was called Double Mystery. And in it, he uncovers that this twin study was done. But I read the article, and I will tell you, first of all, he's very smart. He's far smarter than I am. I was like, oh man, I'm going to have to read this about 5 times to truly get all of this. Seriously, it was very intense.
It's such look at the documentary in 90 minutes.
No, so here's the thing. He doesn't touch on any of that stuff.
Oh.
He really doesn't. It is an article all about twins and twin studies and nature versus nurture, and he doesn't really touch on any of the underlying stuff that he discovered while he was researching that article.
That's so interesting because maybe he knew at that point that he was going to do a documentary because,
No, because that was in 1995. This
wow.
wasn't public. This wasn't shot until 2017 and released until 2018.
Wow. That, I just can't believe like you could be a writer and leave that out. Like I think it would be hard to do that. And I don't know anything surrounding whether or not like the families agreed to talk in depth about that. So maybe that's why he left it out because
Well, and I don't really have a sense of what his timing was in terms of when he contacted the brothers and when this article was published. I didn't get a great sense of the timing between those things.
right.
And the other thing is they show at one point in this documentary that he interviewed Peter
Mhm.
Neubauer, one of the psychiatrists involved in the twin study.
Yep.
But there's not a real sense of when that interview was done.
Yeah,
So Neubauer died in 2008, but we don't really know where that was done in terms of timing with the article and timing with connecting with the twins and the
right.
triplets.
Right.
Anyway, fascinating article, really intense read. It's called Double Mystery. It was published in the New Yorker. It is available online if anybody wants to read it. And he's really the reason that the story came out. He's the one who contacted David, Eddie, and Robert or Bobby and told them that they were part of the study.
Right.
So that's why he's my hero. I mean, he's my hero because I've read other works by him and I've been interested in what he does, but more than anything, it's also the that he is the reason that this study, what little we know about it, came to light.
Well, and I feel like at the end of the movie, we see that the families were given a lot of the parts of the study, although it was heavily redacted.
So the stuff that I read about that is that the reason, so the two boys that are still living, got 11,000 pages of documents. And the reason it was not part of the film is that they got the documents so far after the film was completed that they didn't really incorporate any of it.
Right. And I think Lawrence Wright probably had a lot to do with
Oh,
that
I'm sure
because
he did.
it seemed like the guy's interest in all of this like kind of waxed and waned a bit over the years. And I think that they're scared to find out what they are finding out, but they also feel like they need to find it out. And
I got the
Lawrence,
feeling that David pushed hard. I didn't get the feeling that Bobby was pushing that hard.
yeah, I agree.
A
But
little more about Lawrence Wright because we'll talk
I
more
feel
about
like
all of this
Lawrence
other
Wright
stuff.
I feel like Lawrence Wright is going to be the reason why this is,
Well,
comes to light earlier than 2065.
I don't think it's going to come to light before 2065 because Yale is so scared of getting the pantsuit off of them. I did some reading about that too, and they were like, "Oh, it's not unusual to take archival stuff that we promised to keep under lock and key, and we're really not looking at releasing it because we don't want to get sued." So, yeah.
Okay.
So Lawrence Wright has written 6 books total. He actually graduated from high school, I want to say, in 1965. He's our mother's age. He went to school. Where did I write it down? He went to school in Dallas. He lives in Austin now. He actually taught English at the American University in Cairo for a few years, and they're the university that awarded his master's degree in 1969. He started writing for Texas Monthly in 1980 and became a contributor to Rolling Stone. And now he is still a staff writer for The New Yorker and a fellow for the Center for Law and Security at the New York University School of Law. He lives in Austin. He actually plays keyboard in a Texas blues collective called HULU.
I was just looking at that on his Twitter.
And he also has written a play called Cleo, which is about the making of the film Cleopatra.
Like the one that's coming out?
No, the one that Elizabeth Taylor starred in. The one that's being remade with Gal Gadot. I didn't realize it. I've been mispronouncing her name all these years. It's Gal Gadot. It's not Gal Gadot.
I've been pronouncing it Godot also.
I've totally been mispronouncing it. Actually, a friend of mine corrected me the other day, and I was like, "No way!" And she was like, "Yeah, and you better get it right before you guys podcast about it." Which it didn't even come up when we talked about the movie.
Everything but that came up,
right? But anyway,
it's
it's the same film. It's just being remade with Gal Gadot.
Okay.
So, anyway, so that's. Yeah, Lawrence Wright's my hero, and he's my hero because of all of the journalism he's done, but with this movie in particular, because he's the reason that the boys found out about the study that they were a part of. Right.
That's super interesting that you had already read the book about his the kind of connection to the Satanic Panic, and it was all
I
about...
actually had not. No. I saw when I was doing reading for this podcast that he had written that book about the Satanic Panic, and I was like, oh man, I'm going to put that on my Kindle too. Don't know when I'm going to get to it, but...
It's interesting that it seems like a lot of his works have to do with like child psychology and studies around that. And the same thing with the other writer to the movie, Grace Hughes Hallett. A lot of their works have to do with child psychology. So it always makes me wonder if like they're doing it because of something in their background.
Oh, don't we all ultimately do something because of something in our background? I mean, I think we do.
And I feel like, everyone has some sort of trauma.
I can't deny that, having seen multitudes of humans over the years in very vulnerable settings. I cannot deny that.
Whether you were neglected and had a crappy home, or if you were coddled and spoiled, like, you're always going to struggle with how you grew up.
Absolutely.
And I think that's kind of what they were trying to demonstrate. Part of what they were trying to demonstrate in the horrible study that they put these children through.
We don't know, because we don't even know what the point of the study was, but we'll get into that too.
We'll get into that.
Okay, so Housewives Weekly. I actually have some updates about this film, and then I have a little bit about the Satanic Temple. Okay. So I looked up Bobby and David, the two surviving triplets, and Bobby is an attorney. David is, at the time the article was written, and that was in 2019, so I'm assuming it's a done deal, was in the process of divorcing and works in the insurance industry. So that's kind of the update on the two boys. They never did go back to the restaurant.
We must have read the same article on the tab.
Okay. And then I found an article about Dr. Perlman, who is the one person who was involved in the studies that they actually spoke to on camera.
Right.
And he's the guy who was there for like 10 months. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said that he didn't feel like he was portrayed in a very favorable light. He became a pretty successful psychologist in Ann Arbor, Michigan, got pretty far away from twin studies. But at the end of the article, they said that he does continue to fight for the release of the information because he feels like the people who were part of this study really need to know the information that was collected about them in the studies.
And we'll probably get a little more into it, but I had some mixed feelings around both of the assistants that were involved in the study. And like I said, I think we'll get into it a little later.
Well, so the lady wasn't even an assistant. She was like just someone who worked in the office and like got bits and pieces, but didn't have any interactions with any of the kids.
Yeah. I feel like she downplayed her role.
I feel like she was kind of a monster. Yeah. Okay. There is another documentary that was done about the experiment, and it was done the year before this one was done. It's called The Twinning Reaction, and it's by a woman named Lori Shinseki.
Right.
I might be interested in trying to find that at some point. I didn't go digging for it today.
I kind of did. I think you can I think there is kind of like a PBS style website that you can watch the whole movie on.
Oh, good.
So
okay,
I will have to see if I can find that, and if I can, I will post the link to the Real Housewives Facebook.
Okay, very cool. I did post a link to a CNN article. CNN Films was actually one of the groups behind this film getting made. And the article was 3 Identical Strangers, 5 Things You May Not Know. And the couple of things that I pulled from it that I thought were really interesting was that the documentary actually helped another set of twins from the study find each other. So a woman watched the documentary and was like, I was adopted through that adoption agency. I should probably spit in a cup and put my DNA out there and see what I can find out. And like a year later, she found her twin.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't Elise and Paula that were
right. No, it was not.
Twins.
It was not the sisters that were featured in the
Wow.
documentary. No, it was someone who actually, because of seeing the documentary, found her twin.
The Bobby and David seem to have a lot of unresolved feelings surrounding what happened to them.
Oh, we'll talk about that.
It would be very cool if those women like reached out to them and been like, "Thank you for participating in the documentary. I found my sister."
And maybe they have.
Yeah,
It's possible.
I would.
Let's see. The other thing that I thought was really interesting from that article was that they were really afraid, like especially the director was really afraid that this documentary was going to get sidelined because there were 3 attempts by major studios back in the 80s and 90s to make this documentary, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, I feel like that the 80s and 90s just wouldn't have been the right time, because in the 80s, the guys were still...
They were still babies.
Yeah, they were still living it up in their New York apartment and their restaurant. And then in the 90s, I think it was 95 when Eddie committed suicide. And that was just completely the wrong time. I mean, prior to that, they kind of had a falling out. And after that, they weren't able to mend things. And so... So
certainly the article made it sound more sinister than that. I mean, the article made it sound like these got squashed because the powers that be didn't want this information out there.
Oh yeah, they made a point to point out the Jewish Board of Guardians. That
I'd like the Jewish American Family Council or something that. Yeah. They're a big part of the reason that the records are sealed.
Yes.
Let's see. So I actually left this link open on my computer because I wanted to make sure that I got this right. So Psychology Today in 2019 published an article called "The Truth About 3 Identical Strangers" by a woman named Lois Oppenheim. And she basically is like, this was totally sensationalized and Peter Neubauer is not a villain, and In fact, to quote her, the film ignores critical contextual information and omits evidence. I know, I have issues too, and I'm kind of like, that's like someone inside the hen house.
I mean, Bobby said it at some point in early on in the documentary. This is like some Nazi stuff, and I kind of thought the same thing, and I was like, oh God, what was the famous Nazi doctor?
Mengele.
I was like, I'm sure Joseph Mengele got some really good scientific research out of everything that he did, but it was completely unethical, and like, it will never be done again because it's horrible and they're a horrible person for doing it. Yeah. Dr. Newberry, could have thought he was doing good at that time, but he wasn't. And
so here are her allegations.
Everyone should have known better.
So her allegation, and we'll talk about that too, because that's something I want to go into as well. Here are her allegations. So Neubauer himself was a Jewish refugee.
Mm-hmm.
So she kind of feels like that shields him somewhat. She talks about the fact that he devoted himself as a member of his profession for over 60 years, and he was employed at NYU and Columbia. She also says that his partner in this research, who really wasn't talked about in the documentary, Dr. Viola Bernard, actually was the chief psychiatric consultant for the adoption agency. And she is the person who said, no, really, twins are not adoptable and separation is better. So the author of this article kind of puts that on Dr. Bernard. And she says that other adoption agencies also practice separation. Now, I agree with you, and I agree with what David said, which is none of this makes any of this okay.
Right, exactly.
I mean, this Louise or Lois Oppenheim can be an apologist all she wants, but it doesn't make anything okay.
Just because you say somebody else did it too doesn't make it any better.
None of what they did was ethical.
And you can be a respected doctor, member of society, whatever, but all I can ever think when people say that is I'm like, you know what? Ted Bundy used to walk his coworkers to their cars at night so they wouldn't get, raped or robbed or murdered.
He worked
or anything.
for a crisis line.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
well, so this actually made me go back and like dig into my brain in terms of the stuff that we had to know about ethics in research, because that was a really important part of both research classes that I had to take both undergrad and graduate. And it was a very important part of getting my research project and any research project approved, like knowing the foundational ethics of research. So I was like, when did all this stuff come into being? When did we start to really have stronger ethics around research, blah, 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 blah. And we think that this study happens sometime between, what did they say, 1960 to 1980?
Yes.
So here we go. Here's a brief history of just the 20th century look at ethics in research. So because of Nazi studies, there was a thing called the Nuremberg Code that was established in 1948. And the Nuremberg Code said the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential, making it clear that subjects should give consent and that benefits of research must outweigh the risks. Although it did not carry force of law, the Nuremberg Code was the first international document which advocated voluntary participation and informed consent. So that was back in 1946.
And then we had, what was that?
You're going to bring up the Tuskegee study.
No, the one where they made half of the college students guards and the other ones prisoners.
Oh no, so that's not even. I'm just looking at the stuff that's like the modern trajectory of ethics and research. I know what you're talking about. don't even remember what study that was, but
Yeah, I can't remember. But I don't know. Just messing with people's heads.
So let me finish because I really want to get this out.
Okay.
Okay, so then in the late 50s and early 60s, we knew that thalidomide was causing severe birth defects. So in 1962, the FDA passed into law basically making sure that drug manufacturers prove effectiveness of their products before they market them. So that was a big step in research ethics. The Tuskegee experiment, which was what I thought you were what we're going to bring up, ran from 1932 to 1972. And basically, a whole bunch of men were diagnosed with syphilis, most of them Black. In fact, all of them Black. And they were monitored for 40 years and not treated. And the study was stopped in 1973, only after it became publicized and became a political embarrassment. So that was a big part of us adopting more
ethical.
Yes, more ethical
guidelines.
Practices. In 1964, the World Medical Association established the Declaration of Helsinki, which basically says that research with humans should be based on results from lab and animal experimentation. Research protocols should be reviewed by an independent committee before initiating a study. Informed consent is necessary. Research should be conducted by medically or scientifically qualified individuals. Risks should not exceed benefits. And finally, and this is the thing that I really knew about as the guiding principles. So the National Research Act of 1974 was passed because of the Tuskegee syphilis study. They created a thing called the Belmont Report, and the Belmont Report basically is what to this day guides new studies. And so
I feel like I've heard of it.
Probably have. I mean, it is the document that governs human research in the United States. So it's basically that we should have respect for people. We should not experiment on people who are not able to consent. That means that we can't experiment on pregnant women and children. That we can experiment on people who have diminished autonomy, people who are developmentally disabled.
Yeah.
That we shouldn't do anything that's harmful, that again, benefits should outweigh any harms, that the benefits and risks have to be distributed fairly among research groups. I mean, it's very, very solidly spelled out. And when you go before a research committee, a review board, you have to deal with all of these aspects of the Belmont Report before you can get your research approved. And I feel like, these are definitely some principles that were known but not necessarily codified at the time that the twin study was started. And the reason that it made me dig, and the reason that I wanted to talk about the Belmont Report specifically, is that it just really got to me how unethical this research actually was. And I wanted to go back and see, when did all of these things come into place?
Right.
And there were things that were already in place before and then concurrent to this study. So at any point, I mean, even if they said, okay, well, we're going to completely ignore the Nuremberg Code, in 1974, they could have said, oh, gosh, the National Research Act just got passed and what we're doing is totally not cool.
Yeah. I mean, you would think it would have occurred to them prior to that. Like, yeah, I guess it was a different time in the 60s, but still, like, intentionally separating siblings. Like, ugh.
Yeah, no, the whole thing is just horrifying.
And I was thinking of the Stanford prison experiment.
Okay.
that took place in 1971. So even before the Belmont
Report.
Belmont Report. Yeah.
The last thing that I have, well, actually a couple of last things for Housewives Weekly. So the Satanic Temple, not last month. My brain is still in December. So in November, the Supreme Court dismissed the Satanic Temple's motion to disqualify Amy Coney Barrett from hearing their abortion case. They actually had said that they did not want her to be able to sit on that case because they didn't feel she could be impartial, but the Supreme Court disagreed. So that's our news about TST. And then I just wanted to say to people, just because we have a vaccine, just because the end of the Trump era is in sight, please God, doesn't mean that COVID is getting any better. As of today, we have 20.8 million cases in the United States, 352,000 deaths.
Wow.
So please, 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 mask, hand wash, social distance. Even if you have had the vaccine, which at this point you've probably only had the first shot in a series of 2. That would be me. You're not fully covered with your first vaccine.
No.
You're not even fully covered with your second vaccine. You've got like 94 to 95% coverage. So odds are you're covered, but there are going to be those
It
rare...
does take time to build the antibodies. So it's not like once you get the second shot, you're good. No, it takes a little while for the antibodies to build.
And there are going to be those rare cases who are still going to get infected because there's going to be that, 5 to 6% that aren't covered.
Right.
Yeah, so the research right now indicates that you achieve maximum response 7 days after your second vaccine. It is still recommended that even those of us who are vaccinated mask and social distance and hand wash because we're not sure, even if we're not getting sick from it, we're not sure that we're still not carriers.
Mm-hmm.
So please, 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 people, don't lose sight. I can't tell you the number of people that I see on Facebook who still are posting stuff, friends who are still posting stuff about family gatherings and get-togethers with friends. And, we went out and did this and we got together and did that. And I'm like, that is not keeping your COVID bubble.
This is why we're a year into this thing and we're still having to do this.
And you know what? You and I, we're not going to see Atlanta in September.
Probably not. I was actually just listening to Fauci tonight on the news and they were asking him, so when do you think things will return to quote unquote normal? And he said basically third quarter of this year, so we're looking at like 9 more months of this stuff.
And that's optimistic.
Yeah.
Because honestly, I think we've got so many vaccine deniers and COVID deniers and non-maskers and people who still want to get together because my freedoms that, I think that's really optimistic to say that we're going to have this thing under control by the third quarter of 2021.
Yeah.
Happy New Year, everybody. Okay, just very quickly, Housewives housekeeping. So we participated in a roundtable review at Capes and Lunatics of Wonder Woman 1984. It has dropped both on their podcast feed and on their YouTube channel. So if you're interested in hearing about all of our problems with Wonder Woman, you should check it out.
We talked for 2.5 hours with the other co-hosts, so just as long as the movie.
Oh my God, yes, and we are still debating the issue of consent.
Which really, really should not be a debate, in my opinion. But if that's the hill you're gonna die on, dude.
Pretty much, man.
Yep.
I did just want to say, I know I've said this on other podcasts. I've probably even said it for this podcast. Maybe not, because it's been a couple of weeks, but I loved The Mandalorian. I'm so happy I watched it. Oh my God. It took me so long to get into it. I'm so glad I finally watched it. And now I'm dying for season 3.
And then you had to go watch Pedro Pascal in Wonder Woman 1984.
Which, you know, I mean...
He did an amazing job. It was so comic booky and over the top that I just...
And I'm actually glad that I didn't, like, have a strong association with, this is Pedro Pascal, this is The Mandalorian, at the first time that I watched Wonder Woman, because, yeah. And, I mean, definitely, if anybody had to do the crazy over the top, I'm glad that he got a chance to do it, but... Yeah, it was not the finest showcase for his skills.
Yeah. I think probably my biggest problem is that hair. Like, he was great
right.
as a Tony Robbins type character. But wow, that 80s hair, and it was blonde, and that's just not how
really
I see Pedro Pascal.
Yeah. I also want to say that I'm loving the remake of The Stand, which was done for CBS All Access, and it has inspired me to reread the book. I'm about 60% through the book, which is like a 900-page monstrosity.
I am not loving the reboot of The Stand.
Very interesting.
And, I mean, I have more problems with it than this, but... Instead of making it a 4-part miniseries, they're making us watch 9 one-hour episodes. And I'm so annoyed that they didn't all drop at once. Oh.
All right. That is such a first world problem.
I know. Yeah. I'm petty, but I may be a Gen Xer, but I'm a young Gen X, or I'm sorry, yeah, I'm a young Gen Xer, so I kind of have the attention span of a millennial. So,
well, it'll be interesting to see if we end up covering it for biters and where we go with it, but I'm enjoying the heck out of it. And I think even though they strayed, thus far they have strayed from a fair amount of the book, they've also kept enough of the book intact that I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. And I rescind my complaint about not having the trash can man.
Oh, are we actually going to have the trash can man?
There is an actor who is credited with being the trash can man in the newsstand.
That's good, because I don't know how you could do the book without trash, but
yeah.
All right. Will we ever talk Snowden? I'm not sure. That may just be the last episode of The Real Housewives.
That's awesome.
And then the movie that I was going to recommend that a friend of mine actually posted about last night, and I had never heard of this movie. I'm a little ashamed. So this is a friend who is gay. He lives in Washington State, and he posted last night that he and his fiance were watching And the Band Played On, which was a great documentary, docudrama, actually. Matthew Modine was in it. And I was like, oh, that was great. And he's like, that, Philadelphia, and the boys in the band are like the trifecta. And I said, all right, I love Philadelphia. I loved And the Band Played On. I've never seen The Boys in the Band. He's like, oh my God, you have to watch The Boys in the Band. So I looked it up, and it actually was originally made in 1968, but they did a remake for Netflix last year. And it's kind of it sounds like it's kind of a coming out story.
Huh.
So I think we should watch that for our next episode of The Real Housewives.
The 2020 reboot, right?
Yeah. I couldn't.
Okay.
So the only way that I found the 1968 version was as a DVD, and it's like hella expensive on Amazon. And it was. Oh, go ahead.
Well, the reboot has Jim Parsons and Zachary Quinto. Yeah, you got me.
Okay, very good. All right, so that's what we're going to talk about next week.
Sweet.
All right, good. Do you have any housekeeping?
I just want to put a plug in for a little app called Cameo.
Oh, yeah!
We have talked about the app before, but...
Oh, my gosh.
We originally talked about it on Biters, I think because of Thora Birch. I had never heard of it until then, and there's a lot of Walking Dead people who are on Cameo, and so all year I have been planning on getting Dianne a cameo for her birthday, and it was actually originally going to be King Ezekiel, but I found out that Madge and Biscuit are on Cameo, and I had one sent to Dianne, and oh my God.
It was the best.
Yeah, and like it's amazing. I mean, it's like it's something that's personalized to that person, and like Madge and Biscuit were like they had it done in a half an hour. Now, mind you, I think I probably caught them on a night that they were actually filming them, but they have 7 days to get you the cameo, and they had it done in a half an hour.
And it is so funny. I can't tell you how many times I've watched it.
Yeah, ditto. Like I had it for 4 days before I could send it to her for her birthday, and like I must have watched it like I said 600,000 times. Like, yeah.
It was very funny.
So if you are looking for a gift for someone who is hard to shop for, or even if it's kind of a last minute gift, or, you know, like you don't want to send something through the mail or give somebody, you know, just another thing, get them a Cameo. It's amazing. And you can download it to your phone. You can post it to your social medias. I don't know how long it actually stays on the Cameo app, but you can download it to your phone. So you can have it forever. But if you post it to your social medias, it will come up on your last year thingy, and you get to watch it year after year after year. So
yeah, mine is literally on my phone, and I'll probably watch it
every time you need to laugh.
Seriously.
Yeah. And so this episode not brought to you by Cameo, but
it really, should be.
Yeah, it definitely should be.
And I'm sorry, you probably said their names, and I was like looking up Cameo on my phone because I meant to put it on my phone. Madge and Biscuit.
Yep.
They're amazing.
Yep. They are.
Oh my God, they are so funny.
They actually, like I said, I have the attention span of a millennial, so I watch mostly their TikToks, but they actually have a kind of a regular show that they do, and it's like a full-length show on YouTube, so I'm going to have to check that out at some point.
God, there's so much that I have to watch.
Yeah. Watch and read.
Right.
And listen to.
I still have to listen. I mean, even though I was there for the full 2.5 hours, I still have to listen to our Capes and Lunatics episode.
Yeah, I actually started to do that too. Like once it was posted, I started, and I'm like, I was just on this, and now I'm listening to us do it. But there were 6 other people with us, so you know, it's hard to sort of talk and absorb at the same time sometimes.
We joked with Phil. I do think that he needs to use his mute power a little more often, or yes, as I said, give it to you, because I think you'll use it ethically.
Oh, you do?
I do.
I said that we can do that as long as there is a breathalyzer attached to it. Because I have a tendency to drink more and more as the podcast goes on, and that podcast was 2.5 hours, and the only reason why I was like, yes, let's stop, is because I was out of beer.
So, I don't know. Maybe then, who do you think? Moz or Nick as the most ethical ones to hold the power then? Because I
think they'd both be ethical, but I think Nick would have an easier time doing it, and Moz and Charlie do a podcast together. So I think
good point.
I think he would let Charlie run along. So,
although I don't know, he had pretty good. He had a lot to say.
He did.
It was good. All right. Anyway, we had a good time on Capes and Lunatics. It was fun.
We did. We always do.
Yeah. Anything else for housekeeping? Because,
nope.
Yeah, I'm hella glad you mentioned Cameo.
Yeah. And so I got Di a cameo. I still need to send her a box, but my Satanic Temple merch just arrived today, so I will have to
Only
give
like
y'all.
3 weeks late.
I will have to give you all an update on how the ghost pepper hot sauce she got me is. She got me a mug and ghost pepper hot sauce. So
the mug is a Krampus mug, and it looked super cool from the picture. And then yeah, that the hot sauce could just be really scary.
it could be my COVID test, my home COVID test.
Can I smell the flip side is, with it being ghost pepper hot sauce, it could totally fry all of your senses and you might never know.
That's funny. Well, I mean, the reason why I can stand spicy things as much as I can is because my olfactory senses are pretty burnt out from the years and years of sinus infection and allergies that I have had. So, yeah, that's why I would be good in those competitions where you have to eat peppers.
Well,
I should have been your factor.
I'll be interested to know what your experience with this is.
Yep. Oh, and Phil loves to use that I Love Hooters soundbite he got from I Love Hooters hot sauce.
That's funny. That's very funny.
Yeah, that's all I got. Satanic Temple merch and cameos.
Very good. Oh, I actually got my ornaments. I should probably talk about those. So, you're right. How to say this more than once and saying it 3 times fast. It's just not going to happen. It is an amalgamation of the word horror and ornaments. Horrornaments. And that is actually the name of the shop. It's an online shop, and I got the best Christmas tree ornaments because I decided that if I was going to do a Christmas tree, it had to be odd. So, and I mean, some of the stuff is very straightforward, very, standard Christmas stuff. But I mean, some of it's stuff like I have a Black Widow ornament. I have Rick and Michonne from Walking Dead. I bought the first Halloween nativity set, which I love. And then I got my horror ornaments today. And I got a zombie mermaid, a zombie unicorn, a zombie nurse, Cthulhu, and a gargoyle. And there were several other very, very, very good ones, but I made myself stop. So,
yeah, you kind of inspired me to maybe do a Christmas tree next year, like with not Christmassy stuff, like probably all Krampus stuff.
So I was going, they were sold out of the Krampus one, but they do have a Krampus one. So I was going to felt a tree topper, needle felt a tree topper of Wonder Woman, and I still might, but I found a Funko of Wonder Woman in Christmas garb. So I think I'm going to try to wrangle that into a tree topper.
So there's a great meme or a picture of somebody's tree, and I kind of want to steal it for next year. It's just a Christmas tree with no decorations on it, and it's got like an angry face that somebody like made out of paper, and it has a sign that says, "Feed me elves, I poop presents." That might have to be my tree next year.
That's really funny. But I highly recommend the first Halloween nativity set and the horror ornaments.
All right. 3 identical strangers.
Okay. Summer, winter, and road construction. Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
Go ahead and go first.
So my summer, my good, is that they found out. Because
everything.
There was a really good chance that, I mean, and when I say they found out, I mean that the study came to light, and that other multiples were reunited because the study came to light. But, it wasn't so much they found out because they found each other, but just that they found out that that they were separated and why they were separated. And yeah, that was my good. I mean, that they found each other was just amazing.
Yeah.
It was this incredible fluke of coincidence after coincidence. And for people who haven't watched, you should probably watch the documentary if you're this far into the podcast. But basically, one of the brothers goes to a community college and he gets to campus and everybody's like, hey, how are you? Great to see you. I thought you weren't coming back this year. And he's like, what? And then his brother's best friend like busts into his room and says, hey, I thought you weren't coming back this year, Eddie. And he's like, I'm not Eddie.
Yeah. So, and then Eddie calls David. I think it was David.
Well, no. So he went and saw Eddie, and they met. Yeah. And then there was this thing like that got published in all the news, a bunch of the local newspapers. Hey, these two twins found each other out of this fluke. And then David like saw the newspaper article after a friend of his called him and said, you need to look at this article. And he was like, oh my God, it was like looking at two of me.
Yeah.
And then I think he called Eddie.
Well, initially, I think Eddie called David from the campus and was like,
No. So Bobby called Eddie from the campus.
Okay, that's what it was. And was like,
David was the last to find out.
Were you born in, July 12th, blah, blah, blah? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, were you adopted? Yeah. What adoption agency? Hold on. And he asked his mom, and it happened to be the same adoption agency. And the guy's like, I think I'm your twin brother.
Yeah. And then David, a few days later, was like, holy crap, I think I have two brothers. Yeah.
And, to find out, like, just on kind of a random chance that, like, he happened to go to a college campus where, his brother, had lived. Because I don't think the one had gone to college there previously. I think it was probably a lot of high school friends or no.
No, so actually, he had gone to there. Eddie had gone to college there the year prior, but wasn't going to come back.
That's
right.
And
actually did not go back. And then Bobby went there, and everybody just assumed that Bobby was Eddie and that he had decided to come back after all.
And all their lives, they lived within 100-mile radius of each other, which makes sense if you're the people studying them, because you don't want to have to, like, place them in different states and have to study them from different states. So they were all within 100 miles of each other when they were, growing up. And at 19 years old to suddenly find out that way, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
They could have gone their entire lives
and never known. And that's one of the things that Lawrence Wright says in the documentary is that, he had always thought, what would it be like to walk around the corner and walk into your twin?
Right. I actually have a couple doppelgangers here in Southeast Alaska.
You have a doppelganger who's a friend of yours.
Yes. We actually have not met in real life, but
we've connected. Funny.
Yeah, we've connected online. She actually splits her time between Skagway, Alaska, and Florida. And
I'm thinking of Alexis. I'm not going to say her last name on the podcast because...
Okay, so Alexis actually lives in Washington.
Right,
yes.
Right. That's the doppelganger I'm thinking of.
I actually dated her husband many years ago. And apparently he has a very specific type. But there are apparently many of me out there, because there's actually a set of twins here in Juneau that we all three get mistaken for each other all the time. And we have a similar style too.
Okay, that's weird, Morticia.
Yeah, it very much is. I mean, we all have like kind of the same, I think we all have the same black petticoat, it's very weird that, I don't know, maybe people with dark hair and pale skin with like the same stature all migrate to the Northwest. I don't know, maybe. But yeah, so I have several doppelgangers out there. So if you ever see me on the street and you say hi to me and I don't say hi back, it's because it's probably not me.
I'm just laughing.
And that seriously still happens to me. People are like, I saw you, you know, gassing up your, and this is before I had a truck. I saw you gassing up your truck the other day. I'm like, I don't have a truck, you know?
Oh, can you hear Smalls? He's laying in the background going, oh. All right, what was your summer?
My summer, and this is not a cop-out because I will explain, is the whole crazy story. Like, if you had written this and presented it to a Hollywood producer, they would turn it down because it's just too crazy to be believable. And it all really, really happened. And like I said, when I saw this in the theater, we kept looking at each other and going, oh my God, this can't get any crazier. And, 10 minutes later, it's like, oh yeah, this was a study that they were involved in. What? Like, to have all of this happen in your life, like, I mean, I cannot imagine how overwhelming it would be. And then, to have been triplets for one, then to have been separated close to birth and adopted out to different families, and then 19 years later find each other on a fluke, and then to find out because it was so sensational that they got a lot of publicity and somebody wanted to do a story, and it was like, oh my God, these guys were part of this crazy horrible experiment. And oh, by the way, there are dozens and dozens of other, multiples and individual children that were involved in this study, because the older sisters of the twins, because people went on and on about how similar their lives were.
Which was weird.
Right. And oh, by the way, they all happen to have older sisters. Well, it's because the adoption agencies planted all of these kids everywhere, and that's how they decided where they were going to put these multiples that they were separating. And so, like, the older sisters were basically plants, and the adoption agency called them years later and went, hey, you have a daughter, why don't you adopt a son? Like, it's mind boggling, like, the whole crazy story. Everything about it. I could not put my finger on one thing that was more crazier than the next.
Because it just continued to get crazier.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. So, what was your winter? What was your bad?
So, my winter is that the study is unpublished, and that
that is my bad.
And that there are still subjects out there who don't know each other.
Yes.
And that we'll never know what the point of the study was. Were they studying twins? Were they studying parenting? Were they studying nature versus nurture? Were they studying mental illness, which seems to be actually what they probably were studying?
Right. So we kind of had basically the same bad. Mine specifically was Dr. Neubauer refused to speak about the study.
Yes. And kind of dissembled and said, oh, well, I'm going to publish it in a year or two.
Right.
Which was BS.
And he took his secrets to the grave. He died in 2008.
And as you mentioned, the records are sealed until 2065.
Right. And it was interesting. One of the boys pointed out that the study was done from the 60s to 1980, which was the year the boys found each other and gained all of this fame. So
yeah, he actually said that he thinks they're the reason they shut the study down.
Right. It sounds like they had stopped doing the in-person interviews, kind of when the kids hit prepubescent, because like the kids just were like, I'm over it. I don't want to do this anymore. But I'm sure that they kept track of them somehow. I don't know, but like maybe they continued to have like the parents fill out, a thing every 3 months or something, like I just feel like it didn't actually stop when the boys are, they stopped interviewing and testing the boys. I feel like this creepy psychologist like followed them for the rest of their lives.
And yeah, I don't know. I don't know. We'll never know. Because you and I will both be dead by the time this study is released. By the time those documents are unsealed.
I'll be 85.
Okay, you might still be alive. I'm probably going to be toast.
And you know what? If there is one thing to make it to 85 for, it's the release of these dang documents. Because I am super curious. I will read all 22 boxes worth of stuff.
Right? Ugh. All right, so road construction, I guess it's my turn.
Right.
Just, and it's my bad, ugly. The brothers seem like they will never resolve their relationships with each other.
Yeah, and I mean, they won't get to resolve anything with Eddie because...
Right.
Because he committed suicide in 95. In the article that I think you and I stumbled across on the tab, I think it did say that since the filming of the documentary, the two remaining brothers, David and Bobby, do play golf.
Then you and I didn't read the same article because the article I said didn't say that. It did say that David's children were in touch with Eddie's daughter.
Yeah.
But it didn't say anything about the brothers having contact. So that is a little bit of healing for my heart because it was very sad, like to watch the two of them sit down next to each other and be like, oh, hi. I mean, it was kind of like, dude, haven't seen you in a long time.
Yeah. And yeah, I can't, because they were so close once they found each other. I mean, they all three lived together and ran a business together and, were so involved once they got married and had children, they were all so involved with each other's lives.
Okay, and let's be honest, their crazy hedonistic party life, that looked pretty wild.
It did, but good on them,
It looked like for quite a while it was nothing but one party after another.
Could you imagine if this had happened now in the age of social media where they literally could have just lived their entire lives on their Instagram fame,
Right.
Like they would have had sponsors and they could be millionaires if it had happened in the age of social media.
Although maybe not, because ultimately I think their demons would have caught up with them. Like they did.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. So the article on the tab said, Bobby only works part-time, however, due to a motorcycle accident that happened in 2011. The two brothers have considered working as public speakers, and they were thinking of a couple of commercial opportunities. He said, a lot of people who have mentioned they find us engaging public storytellers. We certainly wouldn't spurn them. We've heard a lot of chatter, but chatter is just chatter until it becomes real. Oh, darn it. Here it is. After many years of a tense relationship, David and Bobby get on really well now, and they go golfing together. Bobby said, David plays golf. I walk around the golf course and follow the ball. And, David was more of the working class kind of guy, too, and Bobby was from the affluent family. So that it seems funny, but it kind of makes total sense. The affluent guy loves golf and the guy from the working class family is like, meh, okay.
That's pretty funny.
So my road construction was just that the families that they were placed with Sorry, Phoenix is in the backyard barking at something.
It's okay. It's not like my dogs haven't barked their way through a podcast or two.
So David was placed in the working class family, the blue collar family. Eddie was placed in a middle class family, and Bobby was placed in an affluent family. And I thought it was very, very interesting that David's father, Bobola, as they called him, was basically the center for a very long time for them.
He was kind of the glue.
Yeah. And he, one of the guys even said that the minute he met the two other boys, he was like, I have two more sons. And he was the one who, when they went to the adoption agency for answers, and the adoption agency is like, oh, well, it's super hard to place multiples, especially triplets. And David's dad was like, that's BS. I would have taken all three of them in a heartbeat,
Mm-hmm.
And so I as much as I hate what was done to them, the psychology of it is really, really interesting. So when you watch the documentary, I feel like David struggles less with what happened. He's a little more kind of resolved that, okay, it happened. It's in the past. I'm going to move on with my life. I'm glad I found my brothers. I'm glad I found all this out, but I would have been okay either way. And Bobby, his dad was described as not a lot of time for Bobby, but a loving father anyways. And so Bobby struggles a little bit more with what happened to Eddie and what's gone on. I
think Bobby also has guilt because he's the one who pulled out of the business.
Right.
And so I think he feels a tremendous amount of guilt, and that might have been what pitched Eddie over the edge.
Right. And so Eddie had a very strict, quote unquote, traditional father. And so it doesn't sound like there was a lot of hugging in that home. And he was the one that couldn't handle all of it. And he was the one that committed suicide. And now I do not blame Eddie's dad for any of it, because we're all a product of our upbringing. And I kind of feel when they interviewed Eddie's dad that that's sort of the way he grew up, a man's man, you play sports ball and, you don't share your feelings and things like that. And so he got through it. So of course, why wouldn't my son get through it?
And here's the other thing that we don't know. I mean, did Eddie have more significant mental illness than his brothers have? I mean, it sounds like maybe his brothers dealt with some depression, but it sounds like Eddie got diagnosed as bipolar. So, was he a lot farther along the spectrum of mental illness than his brothers are? So it goes back to the nature-nurture thing, right? I mean,
yeah, because
how much of it is the environments that they were in, and how much of it is their genetics, and yeah, it's very interesting.
So one of the things about that is David actually took Eddie to a hospital to have him institutionalized. Right. And he said, I felt terrible about that because that's how I spent my 16th birthday. And so he's like, I know what it's like. And I mean, I don't know if how much Bobby struggled. I mean, none of my business, but both David and Eddie spent time institutionalized because of their mental health. And, it's, yeah.
Well, and they did say that all three of them were under psychiatric care at one point or another. So all three of them had struggles with some sort of chronic mental illness. We just don't know how much. And I mean, if you read that Lawrence Wright article, and again, I'm not even going to try to pretend that I understood 50% of the article because it was really intense. But he talks about one set of twins where one of the twins, it was twin girls. One of them was in a very close, connected relationship with her adoptive mother. She was kind of the apple of the eye, the center of the family, blah, blah, blah. The other was not close. She was kind of isolated. Her older brother was held up as the golden child, and she was seen as problematic and different, and ended up with mental health problems. Well, then Lawrence Wright goes a little further in the article, and he's like, actually, both of them ended up with the same mental health issues. And when you look at their charts, when you look at the interviews that they gave as teenagers, they both desperately wanted warm, loving mothers and connections with mothers. So
here's the thing. I think this takes us straight into bycatch.
Okay. Yeah, it really does, actually. So
is, like I said, this just, like, everything around the story just gets crazier and crazier. And I kind of, when they sought out their birth mother, so they met their birth mom, and they kind of noted that she was a pretty bad alcoholic.
And it sounds like they had a few visits with her, but they were pretty clear that she was not central to their time together.
Right. And even David's words that he said he wasn't impressed, and that she had told her story of, how she conceived them. And he said it was not a pleasant story. And I think Eddie then said it was kind of a prom night knock-up. And so it kind of sounds like they were the product of maybe date rape. And so you have a mother that probably has some psychological issues of her own. You have an unknown father who, is probably a date rapist. And so you have that possibly inherited mental illness. But they did not separate these boys until they were 6 months old.
Yeah, so what the heck? Where were they? Were they in an institution for 6 months?
Right.
That's what I got.
There are entire groups that are dedicated to twins who have lost their sibling, and there are even people who have lost a twin in utero before birth that said that they have always felt like half a person their entire lives. And it was noted that both David and Eddie, both David and Eddie. Yeah. It didn't, of course, Bobby wasn't around to be interviewed, but
no,
David and Eddie.
Eddie is the one who passed away.
I'm sorry. David and Bobby both banged their head against walls and held their breath until they passed out. And it was a reaction to a traumatic, separation. They had, been in the womb with 2 other siblings, and then for 6 months they were together, and then they were ripped apart intentionally. So you have to wonder that played a role in their psychology, and so, I mean, nature versus nurture. And then the whole fact that when you observe, just the act of observing something changes it. And, these boys were put through a battery of tests when they were young, and they were studied, and they have memories of these 2 people coming over and interviewing them and filming them and, things like that. And so that probably plays a role. That was probably very weird for them, and so, like, really, nature versus nurture. Like, was it their inherited mental health issues, or was it because of everything that happened to them after they were born?
And I don't think we'll know. I mean, I want to say that I wrote down something from the article. Maybe I didn't. Oh, no. So I wrote it down from the end of the movie. So Lawrence Wright says, ultimately, genes and the environment are close competitors.
Right.
Although, when you read some of the current twin stuff that's out there now, they're really saying genes are a lot more determinative than we ever wanted to admit.
And I think they probably do play a bigger role in things. There's probably a reason why serial offenders, I won't even say serial killers, serial offenders, were mostly neglected or abused as children themselves. So, I mean, there's nurture right there. Nurture right there.
Yeah, that's an argument for nurture. But the argument now is that nature, genes are an even bigger.
Right. But if you have those genetics, if you have let's say the sociopath gene, if you were raised in a loving home, do you then just become the CEO of a company because you're a sociopath and not a serial killer? Because what's that statistic that 25% of the populations are sociopaths, and they're overwhelmingly either serial killers or CEOs.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because one of the researchers that Lawrence Wright talks about in the 1995 article that kind of spawned all of this, she really talks about how even though it seems like genes are more important than environment, that we should really be dedicating our resources to enriching poor environments, enriching environments that aren't good for kids, so that, I don't know, I mean, I'm probably not interpreting it very well, but so that we make up for some of the genetic issues.
Right. I think both play a very very big role in how you turn out later in life, because
like Lawrence Wright said, they're close competitors, but right now the research is arguing that maybe genes are a little more important than environment.
And again, I do not agree with the study at all.
You mean this particular study?
Yes, what happened to
the twin study. Yeah.
But I think if we could gain anything from this or other studies that was done, it's if we could treat mental illness before it becomes a problem. I think that would be beneficial to all society. If you could pinpoint that sociopath gene, or if you could point to a spot in the brain and say that's where depression and anxiety is, and here's how we deal. It's what are they're doing. I'm
so glad you backtracked a little bit, because I was like, okay, wait a minute. As someone who deals with chronic depression, I don't appreciate being lumped with sociopaths. So no. Thank you for cleaning that up a little bit.
There is that. It's like a pacemaker for the brain that we were talking about it's for the vagus nerve.
So there is an electromagnetic therapy that's being used to treat depression. There is a stimulator that goes in the brain that is for treating epilepsy.
Okay. And I feel like the thing that was going into the brain that was treating epilepsy, they thought that there may be other applications to
and there could be
basically benefit other parts of the brain.
There very well could be. I mean, the brain is so mysterious. We understand a lot about the brain, but I think there is I think we understand hardly anything about the brain.
It's like the tip of the iceberg, you know, the most of it is actually under the surface. And so I also kept thinking about the boys' mother, and that how did this adoption agency get a hold of multiple sets of multiples in the 60s? And I was like, God, did they
Well, so 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Right. So did they like persuade people to give up multiples in some way? Or did it just happen to be that women who were in a bad position, probably psychologically, probably socioeconomically, you know, were the multiples given up because of, you know, that?
Well,
and did that play a factor? You know, maybe mom did have. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say
okay.
the other thing is, I mean, we don't really know how many sets of multiples were involved in the study. We don't even know that.
Right.
I mean, it sounds like I want to say that the number that comes up is like 6 to 8. So if you think about that over the course of 20 years, that's not a huge number of women and a huge number of pregnancies.
For one small adoption agency that
we don't know how. Maybe you do. I didn't read about the adoption agency. We don't know how small that adoption agency was. It actually sounds like it was a major agency in New York.
But just in New York, you know, not
right.
like all
but
over
again,
the
I mean, you're talking about 6 to 8 sets of twins and one, you know, and one set of triplets
that we possibly know of.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that we see this the same way.
I feel like that there is something behind that. The multiples were sought out, and they were able to get a hold of multiples, and you know, for their study, and that, you know, maybe, and of course, and I don't want to disparage anybody at all, but like generally, not all the time, when you give a child up for adoption, it's because you were in some sort of position where you can't care for that child, either psychologically, socioeconomically, you know, anything like that.
Sometimes it's just because people don't want the pregnancy.
Right. And, you know, I kind of wonder if maybe they were already predisposed, like people who give up children maybe already have issues. I don't know. Like,
that's a big statement.
I could not stop thinking about their mom. You know, I felt so badly for her.
But I think the other thing that you need to look at is if this was truly meant to be a study of people from families with mental illness, which was certainly strongly suggested,
mm-hmm.
then they're pre-selecting for parents who have a mental illness. So you're not seeing twins or triplets coming from a set of parents that are not dealing with that as a comorbidity.
Right. And again, I feel like we all have some sort of psychological trauma or illness or something. I think that we all generally have depression and anxiety at some point in our lives. I don't think you can live in the world in 2020, 2021 and like not have been affected in some way.
You know, I think we're going to disagree a little bit on that too, because there are a lot of people who don't ever get treatment, who don't ever take medications, who don't feel like that's a significant part of their lives.
Very true. And I will say that I feel like maybe Eddie's father, the triplet who committed suicide, he might have been somebody that was like that was just like, soldier on. We don't talk about our feelings. And, he is a, retired whatever with a home and a wife and like by all outward appearances, he is one of those people that's doing just fine.
And you know what's really funny? So when I look at so we didn't really see much about Bobby's parents, but when I look at like Eddie's father as compared to David's father, like I would pick out David's father as the person who probably didn't ever have any struggles with mental illness and who didn't see it as a significant part of his life because he was so vibrant and was the glue that held his family together. And when the other two boys emerged in and became a part of their lives, like held the three boys together. So I just think it's really funny that we keyed on different.
Well, and I think it's probably because David's father wasn't interviewed and Eddie's father was.
David's father had passed, so.
Right. And but you're right. Like, I can absolutely see, now that you mention it, that, he probably would have, been one that you wouldn't have thought struggled with any sort of mental health issue because, he was just so happy to have his family and, yeah. So speaking of that, it, in a parallel universe, in an alternate universe, things could have turned out very differently for each of the boys had they been placed in a different home, if David had gone to Eddie's home and if, or if Bobby had gone to David's home, nature versus nurture.
Although there are people who would argue that there would not be a change in the trajectories because the boys all had the same genetics. So it would be like moving the same puzzle pieces into different parts of the puzzle. All right. I can't go on too much longer, and I know you can't either. So I want to talk about that research. She wasn't a researcher. She was Peter Neubauer's research assistant, but she described herself.
Natasha Josepowicz.
Yes, she described herself as a peripheral person. And as someone who was not part of the study, but who heard things because she worked with Dr. Neubauer.
Well, and the specific quote was, "I just do the hearsay." And I was like, okay, does that mean she did transcribing? Or I kind of think because
I felt like she made it sound like she just overheard things because she worked with Dr. Neubauer, but she didn't really have any active role with any of the twins or the triplets.
Yeah, and I did
not get that feeling from her. I felt like she was lying.
Yes, she was very happy to point out all of the connections that she had, all of her pictures with the Obamas and a couple of others I can't remember.
I want to say with the Clintons and I think she had a picture with the Reagans and. Yeah, she was a bit of a piece of work.
Yeah, and so I keep forgetting that Viola Bernard was also part of this study.
Right, because again, they don't mention her at all in the documentary.
Right. And so I kind of like in my head, I pictured Natasha as the woman that aided with the interviews and the tests when the children were younger. Yeah. Because they said it was always a man and a woman that came. And so I don't, maybe it was Viola, maybe it was Natasha, maybe, the man was Dr. Newbury, maybe the man was Dr. Perlman, like who knows? But I feel like everyone has tried to downplay their role in this. And it just goes to point that I feel like everyone did get a squeaky feeling doing this, maybe not Dr. Newbury. I don't know, but like
Dr. Neubauer.
I feel like Neubauer.
Yeah.
maybe they didn't at the time, and they look back now and they're like, yeah, knowing what we know now, that was probably a bad thing that we did.
I don't know.
But
It sounds
nobody's
like Dr.
willing to.
Perlman cut out pretty fast.
Yeah,
And
nobody's willing to own up to it.
well, the article that I read about him, where he said that he felt like he was not portrayed in a very positive light, he said that he felt like Dr. Bernard and Dr. Neubauer both were people who just like didn't really understand how to do research and that they got themselves in over their heads. Now, was that true? I don't know. Maybe he was covering for them very much in the same way that Natasha Josefowicz was covering. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I thought that was very interesting. He pointed out they were psychiatrists, not researchers.
I think my biggest issue, and I keep thinking, he like was involved in the documentary, so there's that, and
He
kept
said
his
in the
records.
article, just so you know, he said in the article that there was a lot of stuff that didn't make it to the documentary that he felt would have changed perceptions.
And that's always a possibility, because my feeling was every time he laughed about something, which he did quite often, I felt that he didn't convey the seriousness
He
of what
actually
happened.
specifically mentioned that.
Oh, good.
He actually specifically mentioned that and was very bothered by that.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it was selective editing, which is why, like, I kind of give him a bit of a pass. Is he was only involved for 10 months, and he was willing to be interviewed for the documentary.
I think, and this goes back to you bringing up the auntie as your hero, because I'm pretty sure she's the person who said this. When you play with humans, you do something very wrong.
Yes, she did.
And
She did.
Okay, so let's say they started the study in 1960. They had 15 years of, holy crap, that's what the Nazis did. And we know how to be better human beings.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You and I are, while we don't entirely see some of the stuff from this documentary in the same way, we're very much in we are diametrically opposed to what was done to these kids. And you just know as a human being that that's not okay. You don't do stuff like that to other human beings.
No. And so now, having said all of that, my other half and I had a debate after we watched this last week on Hulu. If there were more multiples involved in the study and you had the power to tell them, would you interrupt those people's lives for that?
Yes.
I kind of think I would too, but I also feel like most people who, and not all, most people who want to know seek the answer. And like Elise and Paula, who were also featured in the documentary.
And I believe their book was called Identical Strangers, right?
Yes.
Okay.
A memoir of twins separated and reunited.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought them up, because I wanted to make sure we mentioned the title of that book.
Yeah. And so I kind of feel like the ones that felt that they needed answers sought them. But the other side of that is there could be people out there who don't know what they're seeking. They don't know they were adopted. Maybe their adoptive parents didn't tell them. And so they sort of always feel this void in their life, but they can't place their finger on it. And it's because, their twin is missing. So I think that I would probably tell them, I would want to know if I were one of them,
Yeah, I would too.
And I think that Jewish Board of Family and Children's Services needs to pay for a lot of psychological treatment.
And needs to unlock those records.
Yes.
Read the Lawrence Wright article, please do, because you're a bright person. You're going to get different stuff out of it than I got out of it. I need to reread it. It's super interesting. That article is now 25 years old. There, at that point, was tons of twin research out there. I want to say it's Minnesota, that there's one university that is a hotbed of research on twins. There's tons of research about people who are chimeras who actually started as twins. I mean, it's so fascinating. It's so fascinating.
Yeah. The human condition is fascinating, let alone
right?
when you multiply it. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack in this movie. I can't believe they did it all in an hour and a half. I would love to see a law be put in place, that if you were involved in a study, you have a right to all of the material.
And I could be wrong because I haven't participated in tons of research, and I've only done one study as a researcher, and that was when I did my master's thesis. But I believe that as someone who is a consenting participant, that you do have a right. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's when the study is closed, like when studies are randomized into, are you in the control group or do you actually get the medicine? I believe at some point the participants have a right to know where they landed, what happened. But I don't know for sure.
And honestly, it would not shock me to find out that it would have to do with how the study was funded, because everything comes down to money. So like if it was funded by public funds, then I could see it being like, yeah, you have to give up the research. But if it was funded by private donors, I could see them being like, no, it's our property. It's our intellectual property. I could totally see it. I don't know that. That's just my speculation. But
so this is the Bill of Rights for Research Participants, and this is from the University of Iowa. To refuse to be in a study at all and to stop participating at any time you begin the study, to be told what the study is trying to find out, what will happen to you, and what you will be asked to do if you are in the study. And then this is an article from Stat News, and it says, all study participants have a right to know their own results. My lab has been doing that for years. But I don't know.
So, and speaking about unethical studies that were done to people, minors or people with diminished capacity. The reason earlier why I thought of the Stanford experiment is because I just watched two documentaries on the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. And part of what was going to be his defense, he ultimately pled guilty because he did not want to put up a psychological defense, because he thought it would diminish the work that he had done in bringing attention to the things that he cared about in his awful way. But so he actually graduated from high school early and went to Harvard at 16 years old. And he participated in a study that was aimed at the psychological deconstruction by humiliating undergraduates and thereby causing them to experience severe stress. At 16 years old, he started being involved with this experiment to be humiliated and dehumanized. And like, sure, I guess you can do that to unwitting college students at 18, 19, 20 years old. But he was 16 when he started this study.
How long ago was that? I'm just trying to place it in terms of the framework of ethics like we've been talking about.
Class of 62.
Okay, so it was before the Belmont report. It was before... I mean, again, it goes back to, okay, as a good human being, you know you're not supposed to do that to people.
Right. Like, and just involving people in these just unethical studies, you know, without them being...
And that is really, truly stuff that would not be authorized now.
Right.
It really, truly is stuff that would not pass the smell test now.
Right. And especially, you know, like I said, okay, I guess you can do that to college students, 18, 19 years old, but he was 16 and he was a participant in it for 3 years. And when they asked him why he stayed in it so long, when it basically scarred him, is because he said that he didn't want to let them know that they got to him. He didn't want to quit because he would be seen as what they were trying to do. You know, they were trying to humiliate and dehumanize him, and he wanted to persevere through that. And and then having watched this and seen the study that they did to these children, you know, at birth and throughout their lives, is just, it is so awful. It is definitely Joseph Mengele type stuff.
It's pretty awful.
It is awful. But the documentary was amazing. Yes, I loved it.
It was. It was very good.
Yeah.
I still need a Hail Satan moment. So I'm hoping that the movie that we're watching next week is a little more uplifting, because I need to be uplifted a little bit. But and why I think of Hail Satan as uplifting, I'm not sure, but there we are.
You know, having what they fight for gives me hope.
Right.
You know, a collective community of like-minded people fighting for the good of humanity will always give me hope. So, Hail Satan. So, I think we just about covered all of it, all the amazingness and all of the terribleness.
Yeah, and we've only talked for 20 minutes more than the movie was. So.
So do you have any last things to add?
I don't. I really don't.
All right.
I mean, I guess I do just want to say, as a healthcare provider, all research is not bad. All research is not like this. We have better protections in place. I would still encourage people to understand what it means. I guess I do have more to say. I would still encourage people to know what it means when they choose to participate in a study, because there are different phases of studies that look for different things. So, for example, you may be signing up for a medication that you think is going to be a cure, and you may be in the stage of a study where they're just finding out whether they're giving you a toxic dose or not. No, I mean, I say that kind of sarcastically, but that's actually quite true.
And honestly, you saying that, I would never have thought of that.
So there's a fantastic book that I would highly, highly, highly recommend. No, it doesn't come as a black and white film. I doubt it's an audiobook, but it's called A Life Worth Living. And it is written by a doc named Robert Martinson, who is both an ER doc and a medical ethicist. And he actually spells out pretty early on in the book what the different phases of a research study are and what they mean, what they're looking for at each individual stage. So if you get put in phase 2 of a research trial, what does that mean as compared to phase 1 or phase 3? And I think that's important information for people who are participating in research to have.
Martha Southgate needs to read that for audiobook for me.
That's awesome. All right.
I think the only other thing that I would have to add is, you're not alone. We've all been there. Speaking as somebody who has suffered depression and anxiety at multiple points in her life and still has situational and seasonal depression, seek help. There are resources available out there for you, and no feeling is final.
I guess I do have something else to say. No, and this is actually really super sad. So there was a suicide on December 31st, and I'm going to blow the name of the representative. One of our congressional representatives lost his son, and it turns out that his son had horrible, horrible depression.
I want to say something like Rathensberg.
It's in the United Minions. I will look and see if I can find it really fast. But it's heartbreaking. So, I mean, yes, there is help. Yes, sometimes depression still wins.
Jamie Raskin.
Yes. Just heartbreaking.
Yes. 25-year-old son committed suicide.
Yeah.
So if you need help, there is a national suicide hotline out there. You don't have to be suicidal to call it if you need resources. 1-800-273-8255.
Thank you for having that handy. Would you say that again?
1-800-273-8255.
Nice.
Reach out for a lifeline. But
all right.
Until then, oh wait, wrong podcast.
Right, not until then. Reach out for the lifeline. Don't wait.
Reach out for the lifeline. And don't forget to watch out for those weirdos.
Because we are the weirdos, mister.
Yes, we definitely are. Have a good week, everybody.
Have a good week.
Bye.
Bye.
Take your pride.